So glad you could stop by this afternoon. David, we have some friends.
Hey guys, welcome. Glad you're here.
Come on in, let's come in where it's nice and warm and sit by the fire and talk a little bit about the journey that we've been on, and maybe you'd like to know some things.
Yeah, come on, follow us.
So, you know, this is a time of year that David and I are, and probably you too, is one of our favorite times of year. It's Thanksgiving time, and we have much to be thankful for, don't we?
So many things to be thankful for, and we're glad that you're interested in talking to us a little bit about the work of adoption. There's so many things we want to share. There's so many things for you all to learn. So have a seat, make yourself comfortable.
This year in 2018, in November, we have plenty to be thankful for, don't we, David?
We have one of the things that we're always thankful for is that God has given His people work to do. And this year we have a lot to be grateful for because His people have been doing a lot of good work this year. We're now up to 268 children. This year we did 54 adoptions. That's 54 children that found their own place at a table this year.
Well, we're excited because number 300 is right around the corner, and we pray and are hopeful and project that in 2019 we'll be breaking that 300 barrier. So those of you who've been on our mailing list and have gotten those darling cards of all the first 100s, and then when we had 200 children, the first 200 children, get ready, because that 300 card is coming with the 300 faces of the children from now 9 countries around the world that God has helped us bring into your homes. We're so grateful for so many things, and we wanted to spend this time to maybe talk to those of you who don't know anything about Sacred Selections, its beginning, and why this even exists. So we'll start back at the very beginning, back in 1952. How's that for going back in the beginning? In 1952, well, actually, we'll go back to 1950. My parents were married, and their first child, my mother, got toxemia, and in her 7th month, she went blind and went into a coma, and my sister died, and my mother almost died too. And it was a very stressful time and a sad time. But a couple of years later, she got pregnant with my brother, and all was fine. And then a couple of years later, she got pregnant with me. Things were going well until the doctor told her, "This time you won't make it through, Carrie. Not only will your child die, but you will die too." So that was 1952, and people didn't say the word abortion much, my mother said. But that's what they wanted to do, the doctor. And in the 1950s, you did everything your doctor told you to do. And my parents went home and they prayed about it. And my father said, "It's your decision, Carrie, but you know how I feel." And it was a wonderful way to make an affirmation of their love and faith in God. And they went back to the doctor the next day and they said, "Is there anything you can do?" So my dad said, "You just do what you know to do medically, and we're praying and we're doing, and God's going to carry her through." And He did. And in 1953, in February, I was born, and everything was great. So all my life, I've known that story, and it has made me personally very pro-life because I know that my parents had to make that hard choice, and they chose to choose life for me. So I've always thought, what am I going to do to give back the great gift that I've been given? So fast forward to college, and I meet this guy.
We met at Florida College, and we dated for a few months, and then we sort of went our separate ways. Neither one of us were ready to be in a serious relationship, certainly not to get married. And so we both went on, got our degrees. She got a degree in business marketing. I got a degree as a clinical lab scientist. And Providence brought us together in 1978. And that time the sparks flew, and 11 months later we were married. What a ride.
It was a great ride. And David, I always say, David was medicine. I was not into medicine, but I married medicine. And because of his degree, he was always in laboratory medicine. So at one point in our journey, we branched out on our own and started our own medical laboratories and shopping centers. And we did radio and TV ads, something that back in '92 was not done. Of course, it's widely done now. Were we cutting edge, David?
We've always been way ahead of the curve.
Way ahead of the curve.
Sometimes it costs us to be way ahead of the curve.
It does. But as part of trying to bring awareness to our labs, we did something called a pregnancy test for $10. This was way before home pregnancy tests. So for a girl to be able to just walk into a laboratory and order her own pregnancy test and it be $10 and that it was a serum test was phenomenal and big stuff. Well, we started getting girls who wanted written confirmation of their pregnancy test that they were pregnant. And David said, you know what that means.
Yeah, so I'll never forget this, the day this happened. There was a young lady, probably in her late 20s. She was a professional young woman, and she walked in for a copy of her pregnancy test, and I gave it to her. And as she left, Dana asked me, why did she want a copy of that? And I said, well, she's probably on her way to Planned Parenthood to get an abortion. And there was something almost magical about that moment. And there was something, as Dana watched this young woman walk out the door and knowing that by the end of that day, a child was going to lose its life, that just was a sentinel event for her. And she knew she had to do something.
You know, I'll never forget the girl. She was in a little gray business suit and her hair pulled back in a ponytail and really adorable. She was her late 20s. And that was 1992. And you know, I've tracked that baby ever since. How old would the baby be this year? How old would the baby be? And of course, that baby by now would be complete adult through college themselves. And I often wonder about that. So that led me to say, we've got to do something about this. Of course, we were not party to any of that. We were not party to the abortions or anything. We're a medical establishment, and because of HIPAA laws, we couldn't talk to the girl. So a good friend of mine who's also on our board, Melody Dickey, confided in me that they were thinking about adopting. And I went, ooh, that might be something that we could work with. And so I went on the journey with her, and we found a wonderful woman who had an adoption agency, and I told her my plight, and she said, you know, Dina, I know what I could do to help you. And she made up these tracts that were just simple little tracts, and it showed a pregnant girl looking out a window, and it just said, adoption is another option. And in silent protest to abortion, and legally within the medical field, I could have those tracts on the counters of all of our laboratories. So that sparked a lot of talk, a lot of interest. We had girls who were coming, who were getting their pregnancy test and then seeing that and picking it up and looking at it and thinking about it. And then we got calls, and then we were getting calls from families who wanted to adopt. And we are not, or never have been, an adoption agency at all. But what we saw was this disparity between when a family wanted to adopt, a young family, usually they were young, they could afford to raise a child, but they never had enough money for the $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 that it costs to adopt through an agency or lawyers. And I told David one day, I said, you know what, we need to set up a 501c3, a tax approved nonprofit charity that people could donate to, and they would know and feel confident that all their money was going to help a child. Because we knew in our hearts this was not a business, as we had set up other businesses before, to make money for us. This was going to be a pure nonprofit. So we went along with that idea for a while, but we ran into so many walls of so many people who try and start ideas. And one of the first ones was that I wanted to set up the foundation to be bona fide, not a little something that you can run over the internet and get your nonprofit status. And a good friend of ours, Kevin and Pam Finley, were here visiting, and we went out to lunch with them, and we had been classmates at Florida College with them, and Kevin told us how he'd gone on and was a lawyer. And I said, what kind of law do you practice? And he said,
Corporate law. He helps nonprofits establish their nonprofit status with the IRS. And the minute that he said that, I looked at Dana and I looked at Kevin and I said, "You have no idea what you just volunteered for."
I was kicking David under the table going, this is our guy. So.
Yeah, so once again, I mean, it was, looking back now, we could just see how God's hand was just starting to move through all this and bringing the right people together at the right time so that we could begin this work, Sacred Selections.
And you know, the thing that we loved about Kevin and Pam from the start is that when I told him what we were trying to do, and I had been quoted anywhere from $25,000 to $50,000 to set up our nonprofit status, I asked him, I said, could you help us? And he said, oh, absolutely. And I said, gulp, how much? And he said,
hey, I'll do it for free. You know, best price we've ever gotten.
He said, I want to help the children, Dana. And his law firm continues to help the children. And we honor him and Pam so much for being a part of the journey from the very beginning. So the journey continued, and we had our nonprofit status. We had the ideas. We had a board together. Everything was clicking, but guess what part was missing? Yeah, the money. It's always missing.
So that was 2004, and then a couple years later, we were both busy running our lab, and another sign of what we look back and consider providence was a national laboratory, Laboratory Corporation of America, in November of 2005 came in and indicated that they were interested in buying us. So we ended up selling our medical lab in 2006. And at that time, all of a sudden, completely unexpected, we had time and we had resources. And one of the questions that we were asking ourselves is, what are we going to do now? And you know, I looked at Dana and I said, you know, you've got this idea, this wonderful idea about helping children and, you know, providing the financial means for young couples who wanted to give a child a home but didn't have the resources to do that. So Dana's vision was to bring the vitality of youth and the resources of older age and bring those two stages of life together so that a child can find a home at a table. So we started working on that, and we took 20 years of business experience and marketing experience and solving problems and kind of walking by faith. And we ended up putting a little cardboard table up at Florida College Lectures in 2007. And Dana set the brochures out on the table, and we introduced Sacred Selections to the world.
And that was a really fun day. But as what the entrepreneur knows, that when you have this great idea, you are always confronted with people who are going to knock holes in it. And that's fine. And we understand that. But it was very interesting to us that the first day we were there, one of our friends who does a lot of missionary work came, and he was telling us about his latest mission, which we were very encouraged by and excited for him. And then I gave him our tract and I told him what we were trying to do. And he went, okay. And he came back the next morning. I'll never forget. It was like bright and early. And he said, Dana, you know, I was looking at this and I'm reading this, and you can't do this because of ABC problems. And I went, okay, but we're not doing A, B, or C that you're saying. And he went, oh. So I went home, and he came back the next day and he said, okay, so I understand you're not doing those things, but what about D, E, F? And I went, no, we're not doing that either. I said, all the funds are coming from private individuals. There's no funding coming from churches or their treasuries. This is all individuals helping individuals. So he came back the third day, and I got so excited because he had the biggest smile on his face, and he said, Dana, I was thinking about this. See, by you helping children go to Christian homes, that means a baby can, or a child of any age, can know God from the beginning, and they can learn about Him through living in a Christian home and one day be baptized. And he said, so what you're doing, do you understand? That's like a mission, like what I do to get people to be baptized. I said, That's right, brother. Get on board the train, and we're rolling down the track. So we encountered this in many flavors over the last few years, and it's a different mindset. I know that it's very hard, and we're queried all the time about where are you getting your money?
From your brothers and sisters all over the country. Somebody said a long time ago that if you tell me, I'll forget. If you show me, I'll remember. But if you involve me, I'll understand. And that statement probably is the most significant statement in terms of the things that we've come to understand by being involved in the work of adoption. One of the biggest lessons that we've learned is that adoption in the name of Christ, receiving a child in the name of Christ, is not charity work, it's spiritual work. We've seen in Scripture that one of the defining characteristics of God's people, whether it's in the Old Testament or the New Testament, was the fact that His people cared for the fatherless, the widow, and the stranger in the land. You know, our foundational verse would be James 1:27. Pure religion before God and the Father is this, to visit the fatherless and the widow in their affliction and to keep oneself unspotted from the world. But that's not a new commandment. That commandment, and the way that James presented it, was a command and an expectation that came out of Old Testament tradition. And so that is something that we've come to understand, that God's people are largely defined as a group of people who, among many things, care for the fatherless and the widow.
That's right. That's right. And we've seen it time and time again. You know, when we first started, the money would come just like manna. We had just enough for each adoption. The first year we did one, the second year we did two, and then it started doubling and tripling. And you'll see on our charts that you're going to be looking at how in 2018 it was 54 adoptions. And God keeps challenging us more and more. But I want to circle back to the beginning about the money, because everybody wants to know, where do David and I personally get our money? And how much of a cut do we get on the donations that are made? And we like to say two numbers to remember. 100% of your donations when you go to the fundraisers goes right to that child that you're helping, and 0 goes to overhead. And God has blessed us, hasn't He, David?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we were able to sell our medical lab and have time and resources to get this started has been a tremendous. I mean, it is a labor of love. And, you know, there's a great passage that I go to many times in Hebrews where the writer is talking about that we need, as God's people, we need to move past what he calls the elementary principles of the gospel, and to move on to things that accompany salvation. And then he goes on to talk about that God is not unjust to forget your labor of love. And, you know, our confidence is not in our work. Our confidence is in God's promise to reward what we do in His name. So it's been a blessing for Dana and I. By far the most enjoyable, the most satisfying thing we've ever done is to be able to spend this part of our lives meeting some amazing young people, amazing old people, and seeing the power of God's family across this country. And sometimes it's easy to be siloed into your own local congregation, and that's not a bad thing. But God's kingdom, His army and His family is everywhere. And when that everywhere group of people get together and pool their resources and their energy so that one child can find a home, it's really impressive. And that's one of the reasons why we're talking to you, is because we're 12 years into this journey. It's growing. There are people who are stepping up to become the next generation of leaders. And that's part of why we're talking to you now, is to plan for when we're not here.
Yes.
There's no reason when we're too old or when we're gone that this work should stop. Because like we said, it's a work that began in the Old Testament. It's a work that was evident in the New Testament. And it's now evident among God's people in the 21st century. There's no reason that caring for the fatherless and the widow should ever come to an end.
And I know what you're thinking right now, but where did Dana and David get their money? And this I want to explain to you, and why we wanted to do this video to show you our home. This is the corporate offices of Sacred Selections. We have no other office. This is my private cell phone that we use for Sacred Selections. The table, the kitchen table, is my office, and you'll see that the checkbook is out. I have some bills to pay. We have some bills to pay, and we also have some applications. This is a daily. This is what's going on all the time. I had a woman, we're in California, so people always think we're in the same time zone. And one day I had a woman, they usually start calling about 6 o'clock in the morning, thinking it's like 9 o'clock. But this woman called at 4, and she said, I didn't think your switchboard would be open this early. And I said, well, this is the switchboard. I sleep with this phone. This phone is with me all the time. Actually, I have 2 adoptions going on right now. That's why I literally have the phone with me. And we want you to know how bare bones, and this is what David and I personally underwrite. We personally underwrote so many of the first adoptions just because it's hard to raise money for a concept that people don't understand. We're vested in this emotionally, financially, everything, and we do not take any money from anybody. We pay our own travel. We take care of that with what God has blessed us with, and we can't think of a better way to use what God has blessed us with. Our children both know there is no inheritance. It's all for the babies, but that's the most wonderful inheritance, because I personally feel that now out of our children, we've had 23 be baptized and adopted by Christ. And that's the end game of all of this. And I see down the future, just like in the Bible, how it says, begat, 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 and then there's a David. There may be a child in the future that's a child or a child of one of our Sacred Selections children that brings one of our own great or great-great-grandchildren back to the Lord. I mean, this is a long-term play that we're talking about. We want as many Christians in the world as we can, and how wonderful to start from the beginning and have a child. Our favorite thing is to have some of our Sacred Selections families will send us a video of their child singing Jesus Loves Me, or the first day they were in Bible class. And that helps remind us on sad days and bad days when everything doesn't go the way we want it to, that God has a purpose. And the ones, which one year I took a log and over 700 calls, emails, or texts about children in need of a home. And we certainly didn't have enough families for all of that. But David's taught me that the ones that God brings to us are the ones that he has a purpose for. And we don't know what that purpose is, but we know he has a plan, and we're going to fight all that we can to help see that that child gets into a Christian home. Now, we've helped all ages from birth to 17, and one family who'd helped a little 8-year-old boy told him, he said, well, Miss Dana said God has a plan for you. And he clapped his hand into it. Ooh, what's the plan? And Samuel, I don't know what that plan is yet, but I know it's going to be a great plan, and we all wish we knew. But at the end, when we're all in heaven together, it will be quite the rejoicing of all these children and their children. And the children of tomorrow will understand adoption better than we do, because they've lived it. They understand salvation and redemption better than we do. And we believe that the children of tomorrow will have a line item on their budget. It'll be a monthly budget. How much are we doing to help somebody adopt a child? So we're so excited that you're even interested in what we're trying to do with adoption and with Sacred Selections. We have over 5,000 volunteers worldwide now who help us. It's just been a remarkable journey, and people come up to us all the time, how can I help? How can I help? And that's wonderful to see. Children doing lemonade stands, to older women who are making quilts for us, to some women who are baking pies for us. All of that goes together and raises the money for all of these over 200 children now. It's biblical. It's exactly what we should be doing with our time.
Every year when we do 20 to 25 fundraisers every year. We travel all over the country, and we have a theme every year for the presentations that we do. Last year, our theme was adoption is not charity work, it's spiritual work. And one of the ways that we present that is that nearly all of the circumstances that surround the case where a child needs to find a home is a dark place. And adoption shines an amazing light in so many ways in those dark places. This year, our theme is to will and to do. And what we mean by that, it comes out of the story when the Roman centurion comes to Christ and asks him to heal his servant. And when Jesus offers to come to his house, he says, I'm not worthy that you come into my house. You know, all you need to do is say the word, and I know my servant will be healed. And of course, we know that Jesus' eyes got wide, and it says that he marveled at the centurion's faith. And I think that what his faith was that he understood that God reveals his will through his word, and he accomplishes his will through his people. When it comes to children, there's no question about what God's will is for these children. It says in Matthew 18, he says, in talking about the parable of the 99 and the sheep that was lost, and he makes the concluding statement that it is not the will of your Father in heaven that one of these little ones should be lost. And so how does God do that? Well, what we've seen over the last 12 years is that God provides for the fatherless and he cares for the orphan through us. He's given us the command, he's given us the example, and he's made the expectation that I administer justice and mercy through my people. And Paul says in Philippians chapter 2, he said, "For it is God who works in you both to will and to do." And that's been the amazing thing to see over the last 12 years, that hundreds, or as Dana said, up as many as 5,000 of your brothers and sisters, God is working through them both to will and to do to save these children. And so that's been the powerful thing about us. And again, that's not going to change when we're not here. That is an expectation that will live as long as this earth exists.
Unfortunately, that's right. I mean, we've caught, as my one friend always calls, you've caught lightning in a bottle. And for these past 12 years, God has blessed us. But David and I don't want it to stop with us. We feel that God keeps giving us more and more connections and helps us to learn more what we're doing. So we want to bring on people and train them to do this after we're gone. We know that not all people will be able to work for free like we are, but we hope that there's a model that's been set up that can keep going, and we're working very hard for that. Please pray for this journey too. Please pray that there will be people to come forward to help us with this. We're very excited and very hopeful with some of the people that we're talking to right now. There's no reason why it shouldn't keep going. And we just appreciate so much you spending some time with us and learning more about Sacred Selection. So if you've had questions, you can always reach us on my cell phone, 916-770-0336. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, because we do almost daily posts, and they're very affirming. And in all of our posts, we mention God and we praise Him, and they're very positive. And many people tell me that on a bad day, they'll just go back to Facebook and just scroll through all of our posts just to see how God has come through and helped so many children. Now, when we talked at the beginning about the young couples that needed help, we've helped couples as old as 72. So our eyes have been widened to the need. It's not just young couples. And we are so encouraged by people who are ready to, after they've raised their children, go again, or the people who have said, we can add one more plate at our table. And the blessings that come from that plate are amazing. If you would like to reach us, you can always reach us at info@sacredselections.org. Call us. We would be happy to spend time with you and answer any personal questions you might have about Sacred Selections. But we wanted you to know who we were, what we stood for, why we're here, and why we won't stop doing this. My kids tease me all the time that I'll be on the phone talking with a birth mother as my last breath, and I hope I am. I hope I am working all the way to the end, because that's another child that gets a chance to know God. We also want you to know that we're very, very much involved in helping birth mothers and birth fathers during this time, before, during, and after. This is not about take the baby and run. We've had 4 of our birth mothers who we've worked with that have been baptized, and 4 that have come back to the Lord. We've had 2 birth fathers be baptized, and now we have 2 sets of grandparents who are coming to church and knowing more about the Lord. And this is very important to us, that you understand that, like David said, adoption starts in a very dark place. And in that dark place is when God shines his light the brightest. And they want to know, who is it? And these are why we have so many adoption connections. It's because of our wonderful New Testament Christian families who apply to Sacred Selections and get funding, who, when it's rough and scary at the hospital, everybody's impressed, so that an agency will call me and say, I don't know who you people are. I just had one on Friday say, I want to only work with you and your Sacred Selections families. So they call us, and we tell them who we have that's funded and home study approved and ready to go. So you see, it's a very interesting dynamic, because most agencies and attorneys are in competition with each other, where we're like, what is it, you call it, a free agent?
Mm-hmm. Independent broker.
Independent broker. We can work with any adoption agency, any attorney in the U.S., and we do. And usually if we do one, we're doing several. And that's why our numbers are growing, because of all these connections that God just keeps. I mean, you talk about a carpet that says welcome every time when they see and they know our story. They love our families. And I know probably some of you know our families, and that's probably why you're intrigued about Sacred Selections, so you know the quality of families. And we now have Sacred Selections children in 29 states across the U.S. We have a good friend that does a lot of gospel meetings, and he tells us, when I go to a new church, I just walk in and say, okay, show me your Sacred Selections children, because he said, odds are there's one there. And that's what's so gratifying to us, and that's the genius that God shows us every day. Is he shows that many people think because we're in California, all the adoptions are here. There are very few here. They're all over the U.S. and now the 9 countries around the world. So we appreciate your support. We appreciate you giving us time to talk with you today, and hope we hear from you soon, and how you can be a part of this wonderful journey in love.
Thanks for listening.
Sorry, phone's going off.